For nearly 40 years, one machine has haunted our collective imagination. Not a car, not a computer, not a smartphone. A robot. The T800. A machine so iconic that even people who have never watched a single Terminator film know exactly what those glowing red eyes mean. Danger. Extinction. The moment humanity loses control. For decades, science fiction taught us to fear the day machines would walk among us. But what happens when that day arrives and the machines don't come to destroy us? What happens when they show up carrying shipping boxes? What happens when they work the night shift? What happens when they start unloading trucks, stocking warehouses, patrolling campuses, inspecting equipment, and helping factories stay open? Because that is exactly what is happening right now. While much of the world has been focused on generative AI, large language models, and digital assistants, another revolution has quietly stepped out of the laboratory and onto the factory floor. A revolution with legs. Today, in Shenzhen, China, humanoid robots are being manufactured at a pace that would have sounded impossible just a few years ago. And one of them carries a name that sounds remarkably familiar, the T800. Not the fictional assassin from Hollywood, but a real machine, a real product, a real business investment. The Terminator didn't show up carrying a plasma rifle, it showed up carrying a pallet jack.
Welcome to the Human Workforce Podcast. I'm Lara Rowencroft. Joining me today are Simon Carver and Chris J. Murphy, known to everyone as CJ. Simon, that opening hook is a phenomenal bit of framing, but let's cut straight to the operational reality. When an enterprise looks at a machine named the T800 today, they aren't looking at a sci-fi threat. They're looking at a solution to capital allocation and throughput bottlenecks. CJ, how do we bridge this gap between the pop culture nightmare and what's actually happening on the ground?
Well, let's talk about what's actually happening, Laura. The real story here isn't the name, it's the shift from digital software to physical agency. For the last 3 years, we've lived in this collective fever dream about large language models. We've talked about ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, intelligent systems that live behind a glass screen. They generate text, they write code, they produce pixels, but they can't turn a wrench. They can't lift a 50-pound container off a delivery truck and place it onto a sorting conveyor. The moment you give AI a body, when you give it hands, legs, and spatial awareness, the entire economic equation of automation changes.
It's like going from a brain in a jar to a worker on the floor. I mean, think about it. If you have an incredibly smart AI, but it's stuck inside a computer, it can only help you with things that can be digitized. But our entire world, our factories, our shipping hubs, our grocery stores, they were all built for a specific form factor, the human body. We've got stairs, we've got door handles, we've got narrow aisles designed for two-legged beings with 2 hands and 10 fingers.
And that's the core architectural constraint, Simon. In the past, industrial automation required us to redesign the entire environment to fit the machine. Think of the classic automotive assembly line. You build a massive, multi-million-dollar cage, bolt a giant hydraulic arm to the floor, and program it to do one highly repetitive task, like spot welding a specific frame rail. If you want to change the car model, you have to spend months re-engineering the physical layout. Humanoid robotics reverses that paradigm. Instead of rebuilding the factory to accommodate the machine, we are deploying a machine that can navigate the factory as it already exists.
Exactly. We've built a multi-trillion-dollar global infrastructure optimized for the human form. The doors are 3 feet wide, the shelves are 6 feet high, the tools have handles designed for a human grip. If you have to redesign every warehouse in the world to fit specialized wheeled robots, the capital expenditure is astronomical. It's prohibitive. But if you can build a general-purpose physical platform that can walk through those same doors, climb those same stairs, and use those same manual pallet jacks, you bypass the infrastructure cost entirely. You're deploying software updates instead of pouring concrete.
It's wild to think about. We're talking about a robot that doesn't need a special track or a magnetic strip on the floor. It literally just walks in, looks at a box using computer vision, figures out how heavy it is, and stacks it. It's doing the stuff we usually associate with physical intuition, like when you lift a milk carton and your brain automatically adjusts your muscle tension based on whether it's full or empty. That's a massive computing challenge, but these new machines are actually doing it on the fly.
This brings us to the operational why. Organizations do not adopt complex, bleeding-edge hardware platforms just because they are technologically interesting. They do it because they are facing severe structural pressures. If you look at the macro data, we are facing an unprecedented demographic squeeze. In major manufacturing hubs, we aren't seeing companies trying to aggressively lay off human workers to replace them with robots. What we are seeing is a desperate search for labor to fill empty shifts.
We've seen this pattern before, but never at this scale. The real question isn't whether machines are taking jobs, but who is going to do the jobs that humans are actively moving away from? Let's look at the numbers. Across OECD countries, the working-age population is shrinking. In places like Japan, Germany, and parts of East Asia, the decline is structural and accelerating. At the same time, younger generations are choosing not to enter heavy physical labor. They are pursuing careers in digital services, tech, healthcare, or roles that offer geographic flexibility. You can't work a warehouse night shift remotely from your laptop.
Oh, absolutely. I think about my buddy who runs a regional logistics hub. He tells me his biggest nightmare isn't shipping costs or supply chain delays. It's literally just finding people who want to show up at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday to unload crates in the freezing cold. It's tough, repetitive, physically punishing work. People are voting with their feet. They want roles that have more agency, less physical wear and tear. So these robots aren't stealing opportunities. They're basically acting as a demographic shield.
That term, demographic shield, is highly accurate. If you look at the operational risk register of any major logistics or manufacturing firm today, labor availability is consistently in the top 3 risks. It's not just about cost cutting, it's about business continuity. If you can't staff your third shift, your entire supply chain backs up. The port gets congested, the retail shelves go bare, the factory idle time spikes. Humanoid robots are stepping into what I call workforce voids, positions that are vital to society's basic functioning, but are increasingly impossible to staff with human capital.
And this is where we have to challenge the dominant corporate narrative of pure efficiency. The fear-mongering headlines love to show a robot and say, "Is your job next?" But when you look at the actual deployment strategies of companies testing these systems, they're starting with the tasks that have the highest injury rates and the highest turnover. It's the repetitive, heavy lifting, the overhead reaching, the carrying of hot materials. By shifting those specific physical strains to a machine, you aren't eliminating the human worker. You're actually protecting them from physical degradation.
Right. It's like how we don't wash our clothes by hand in a river anymore. We got washing machines, and nobody sat around mourning the loss of the scrubbing board. It freed us up to do other things. But wait, if the robots are taking over the heavy lifting, what does the human worker actually do during that shift? How does their day-to-day role change?
That is where the transition gets complicated, Simon. The work doesn't disappear, it elevates. Instead of a worker spending 8 hours a day manually moving boxes from point A to point B, that worker's role transitions into fleet management, exception handling, and workflow optimization. You become the supervisor of the machines. If a robot encounters a damaged box that it doesn't recognize, or if there's a spill on the warehouse floor, the human steps in to solve the problem. It requires a completely different skill set.
And that's the real challenge we face, the upskilling gap. We are incredibly good at engineering the hardware. We can build robots with carbon fiber limbs, advanced actuators, and state-of-the-art vision systems. But we are lagging behind in preparing the workforce to manage them. If you take a worker who has spent 15 years performing manual labor and suddenly tell them they are now a robotic workflow coordinator, managing a fleet of 5 humanoid machines via a tablet interface, you've changed their job entirely without giving them the pathway to succeed.
That's such a huge point. It reminds me of when office workers had to transition from typewriters to computers. It wasn't just about buying the PCs. You had to teach everyone how to use a spreadsheet, how to manage files, how to troubleshoot a printer. If you don't do that training, the machines just sit there, gathering dust. Or worse, people get frustrated and workarounds start happening. We need a massive effort in vocational training, specifically for co-working with these physical AI systems.
This isn't accidental, and it shouldn't be treated as an afterthought. Organizations that succeed in this transition are the ones designing the training programs parallel to the hardware procurement. They are investing in their existing staff, showing them that their value isn't in their muscle power, but in their judgment, their situational awareness, and their ability to solve complex, non-standard problems. That is what AI and robotics still struggle with. They can handle the predictable, high-volume tasks, but they fail when things get messy.
The real question isn't what AI can do, it's what humans should do. If we design this transition intentionally, we can return people to roles centered on leadership, strategy, and creative problem solving. It's a collaborative symphony. The steel handles the repetition, the human handles the complexity. That sounds efficient, but more importantly, it's more human. It elevates the dignity of the work.
I love that image of a symphony. It's not about the machine replacing the human instrument. It's about adding a new section to the orchestra so we can play a much bigger, more complex piece of music. If you enjoyed today's discussion on how we're navigating this physical AI revolution, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe to the Human Workforce Podcast. Your support helps us keep bringing these deep, grounded conversations to light.
Yes, please share this with colleagues and leaders who are trying to make sense of how automation is reshaping their industries. We need to move past the sci-fi fear and focus on the real-world strategy.
The future doesn't belong to those who fear AI or blindly follow it. It belongs to those who know how to stay deeply, unapologetically human. For Simon Carver, Lara Rowan-Croft, and myself, thank you for listening to The Human Workforce. We'll see you next time.